Hello, friends, and welcome to episode number 69 of Nostalgia Talk. I'm James. I think that was the first time I ever gave a normal intro. But anyway, joining me today is Dennis Scott. Welcome.
Hello, I am glad to be in the nostalgia world with you.
Well, welcome to the nostalgia world. For those of you who are not aware, Dennis is a composer and musician who's done a ton of work on kids shows, a lot of kids shows that many of you are probably familiar with, such as Mister Rogers Neighborhood, Noddy, Sesame Street, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss, Tweenies. He's done a lot of albums for Sesame Street and Noddy and Mister Rogers. He's worked with a lot of great celebrities, and a lot of these we are going to get to. But to start off, Dennis, welcome to Nostalgia Talk.
This is great. I'm so glad to be here. And if you hear any sounds out there in radio and TV land and podcast land, that's the little dog that I have in my arms who is afraid of storms. And we're about to have one here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. So, Dennis, I know you and I were talking about this earlier, but to any of the listeners who don't know, we just had massive storms here in Nova Scotia. Like there was a lot of flooding. Thank God I don't have a basement, but my whole house, like the outside of it was like a moat.
And by the way, I was not too far from you a few weeks ago. My family and I went to visit Bar Harbor in Maine.
Oh, wow.
And, we had a great time, except for all the rain, the fog, and the mist, which we couldn't really see too much, but it's still beautiful. We're glad to get in somewhat colder weather than we're having here in Nashville.
Yeah, we had a crap ton of rain here, but it's been so muggy.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get us off track with the weather, but
oh no problem at all. So to start off, how did you get inspired to want to become a musician, and what were some of your biggest influences?
Oh, well, like so many guys my age, when the Beatles came out, it changed our lives. If you were of a certain age, you ran out and you bought a guitar, no matter how much it cost, and you bought all the records and you wanted to try to play like the Beatles. And I had an older brother who was already doing that, so he was a great influence. And I just picked it up and never put it down after that. And then went on to enjoy other groups, not solely the Beatles, but they're the ones who were the catapult for me getting into the music business.
Okay, so you were mostly inspired by like pop and rock.
I would say so. I mean, I was a kid, so I was watching children's shows, but my transition into the world of children's music didn't happen until many years later.
Okay. So what was your first gig in music, like before children's shows? Like where did you start?
Well, it's a tricky question to answer because I was a child actor growing up. I did my first gig on Broadway when I was 7 years old. Mm-hmm. So, and it was a musical, so I guess you could call it my first musical gig.
Mm-hmm.
But it was well, circa 1962 or so, and it led to other gigs, and I was doing TV commercials, and I was on specials like a Jonathan Winters show. And for those of you out there who know who Sammy Davis Jr. is, one of the legendary performers of our time, I did a kids special with him, and there was an old show called Route 66. It was a pretty successful dramatic show on TV, and that was my first acting role on TV.
Wow.
I played the part of a kid, which was very easy because I was a kid.
I'm just a kid and life is a nightmare.
Exactly. So, I had great lines like, "Hey, golly, is that your brother?" "Hey, it sure looks like your brother. Golly gee," and the writers wrote what they thought kids were saying in those days, and maybe we were. So, and then so the transition to music, I'm anticipating maybe your next question, or to songwriting, really came about when I was on the road with a singing group called the New Christie Minstrels. And that's a pretty old name in the world of the music business, but they were the training ground for a lot of artists who went on, like Kenny Rogers was in one of the original groups. And finally, when I was surrounded by songwriters, and we would be on a bus traveling for 7 hours to get from one town to another, And I thought this is a good time to maybe to start trying my hand at songwriting. And so that's what I did. And that became, well, the story is that I wrote a song called Captain Kirk's Disco Trek, because I love Star Trek. And I like playing around with words, and I thought discotheque, disco trek. And so I wrote this song, and I thought maybe it could survive on radio as a novelty song. But when I shopped it, nobody was really that interested. But ultimately, I took it to a children's record label, and they said, well, we can't use it either, but we like your writing. Would you like to try writing some song parodies for us, and we'll put them on an album? I said, sure, let's do that. And that went well. And I thought, what do I do now? So I took that album to Sesame Street, which at the time had its own record label. And they said, well, we don't know what we can do with this, but if you want, come into the office like 3-4 times a week and work on this project that we have that we're planning to do called Sesame Country. It was going to be the Muppets and different guest artists sing country songs. And my assignment was to get on the phone and call different well-known celebrity artists and see if they'd want to be on this album. So I would go into New York City 4 or 5 times a week, put on a tie, wasn't even getting paid to do it, just trying to get my foot in the door. And I managed to get Crystal Gayle, Loretta Lynn, the late great Loretta Lynn.
Yeah, who just passed away a couple months ago. Yeah.
And the even maybe later greater Glenn Campbell, who we lost, and Tanya Tucker, who actually was his girlfriend at the time. And so we recorded this album in Nashville, which started my love affair with Nashville, and it went on to win a Grammy Award. And I thought, this is good. I like this. And I wrote, I guess out of maybe 12 songs, I wrote 9 out of the 12 songs that appeared on the album. So I thought, this is a good place for me to be. And I enjoyed writing kids' music and bringing whatever pop sensibilities I had to that, and working with Sesame Street. And I got kind of palsy with the gentleman who played Big Bird, Carol Spinney. So we became friends, and it was an incredible experience.
And what was it like to work with a lot of those greats? Like, because on that album, I have listened to it. On that album, of course, not just Carol Spinney when it comes to great classic Muppet performers, but you've also got Jim Henson, Frank Oz, Jerry Nelson. Frank Oz, of course, is still alive. What was it like to work with such legends as them?
It's kind of like an out-of-body experience, because I mean, Jim Henson he was a legend already, a living legend. And what I think was interesting, the people at Sesame Street Records said, okay, we're going to book Jim Henson to be on the album. He was doing Ernie, and no, Kermit the Frog was not on this one. So he did Ernie rather. And they said, okay, you can have Jim Henson from 12:47 to 3:45. And at 3:46, Jim leaves. He walks out. If you're in the middle of singing a sentence, it has to be done by then, because I think he was working on the movie Dark Crystal at the time.
Okay.
So he was so divided with so many projects and so many commitments, and so they lagged down the law to me and said, this is how it's got to go. And we did. We were very aware of his schedule and made it happen. But actually working with him, he couldn't have been nicer. I mean, he had people around him making sure that he got to where he had to go, but he was a true professional, as nice as he can be, came prepared, and he was funny. And I've got a bunch of outtakes from that album, which probably never see the light of day. But just being around him and the other characters, and Frank Oz as well. I mean, he's a funny guy, and we got along great. So, I mean, one of the most cherished things that I have is the sheet music for a song that I'd written that he and Frank Oz and all the other guys sang on, and they signed it for me. And I proudly display it in my studio, and when people come, I said, "Look at that signature, Jim Henson." They may not be so impressed with other things I've done, but they see Jim Henson's name and they say, "Wow, that is so cool."
Mm-hmm. And with Jerry Nelson, I don't know if you know this, but he actually recorded an album of country and folk songs. Have you ever heard it?
As himself or
As himself, yeah.
No, I did not hear about
Oh,
that.
okay. It's called Churro Daydreams. I think you might be able to find it on like Apple Music or Spotify. I have it. It's
Ah,
like there's a ton of like I don't, Paul Rudolph, who's one of the music directors for Sesame Street. He told me that a lot of those songs were actually written like before like while he was on Muppet Show, Muppets Tonight, and Sesame Street and all that. And then finally he put them all together and made an album.
wow. People have lots of talent, so they don't always show up where you expect they're going to.
Mm. What was it like to work with Jerry for the Sesame Street country album?
Oh, that was fun. He sang a duet with Loretta Lynn,
Mm-hmm.
appropriately called "Count on Me for Count," and and
Together again for the first time.
there you go, very good. And that was again a great experience. It was also a great experience when we filmed it, because there's an episode of Sesame Street which actually has him and Loretta Lynn singing. Um, he Ironically, he was a little bit more prepared than she was. We had done the song in Nashville months earlier, and
So the Muppet performers recorded the album in Nashville too?
yeah, not all of them, but we had Loretta and Crystal Gale, and they came in to do an episode, and we I was on the floor below where the camera was, conducting Loretta so she would know when to come in and what line to sing. So and it was, come to think of it, it was like that in the studio as well, because she was kind of a fly by the seat of your pants kind of gal. She in fact, I don't know if anyone will appreciate this, but she came to New York to do a show at the Westbury Music Fair. And here's how gutsy a gal she was. I knew she was coming, so I got a ticket and I went to see her perform.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent her a little note saying I was going to be there. And in the middle of the show, she looked out in the audience and said, "Where's that Dennis Scott guy? Where is he? Is he here?" And I waved my hand and she said, "Come on up here." And I said, "Okay." So I walked onto the stage. "Hey, let's sing that song that we recorded on Sesame Street." I said, "You mean Count on Me?" "Yeah, let's do that." And we had not, she performed it once or twice and never done it since then. And then months and months had passed. And the band didn't know it and had never heard of it. So I turned the band and I said, "Okay, just start on C chord and good luck. Hold on to your hats."
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't remember half the words. And I tried to do the count part against her singing her part. And it was pretty touch and go there. But I think the audience just enjoyed the fact that she was so spontaneous. So you would think that's where the story ends, at this exciting experience, singing with Loretta Lynn on stage to a song that neither of us could remember. But no, she said after the show, "Hey, that was fun. Come on back in the evening. We'll do the evening show together." So this time I thought, okay, we have a chance of making this better. So I called a friend of mine and said, "Quick, get me a lead sheet and we'll give it to the band." And then read the number system, the Nashville number system, using numbers instead of chords. And I got a lyric sheet for Loretta, so she had a fighting chance at what the lyrics were. So it went a little bit better, but nothing will ever replace this memory of singing with Loretta Lynn and just spontaneously, no rehearsal, no nothing.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That's so cool.
It's one of those showbiz stories that you think will never happen.
Well, that's great. And you also said that you became friends with Carol Spinney. What was he like?
Carol was such a sweet guy. We just hit it off from the beginning. It really helped that he liked the song that I had written. It's a song called Songs, and
Yep.
he did a duet with that with Crystal Gale.
That's one of my very
And
favorite Sesame Street songs, actually. I should have mentioned that in the intro, that Songs is one of my favorite Sesame Street songs.
ah, that is music to my ears. Well,
Mhm.
and that is a song that has done very well for me in other usages. I don't know
Mhm.
if your listeners would remember the TV show Fame. It's actually being in reruns somewhere.
Mhm.
And they did a big production number of that with Jimmy Osmond, one of the Osmond brothers,
Mhm.
singing the lead on it. And there were dancers and everything. And it was also sung by Aileen Quinn, who was the original.
Original Annie, yes.
Yeah, they got on the
My
movie.
yep, my sister has her autograph. I found an authentic autograph from her, and I was like, my sister loves that movie, so I bought it for her.
Oh, wonderful. Well, she covered it, and there are other uses. It was actually also in a Macy's Day Parade for Thanksgiving. So, um, but to get back to your question, so we just became friends. We started meeting once in a while, and he invited me out to his gorgeous place out in Kent, Connecticut, and he had, I don't know, 5 acres, and he had a man-made pond with little paddle boats on it, and he had a Japanese pagoda, which was a skating rink. So and giant old classic trains, electrical trains. So, but we would commiserate, and sometimes things were tough at Sesame Street, and he would tell me what's going on. I would tell him what's going on with me, but he was an extraordinarily talented man and a wonderful guy.
I bet, yeah. And you wrote a couple of different songs for Carol as both Big Bird and Oscar. One which was on the Sesame Street Country album that I do want to talk about, the one with Glenn Campbell. My dad is a big Glenn Campbell fan. When we used to go and visit his mother before she passed away from Alzheimer's disease, and during that period of time, it was really, really bad. And so my dad would go and visit, and he'd ask me to come with him, and I'd come because in a case like that, you never know what could happen. So I joined. And on the way, we would always listen to Johnny Cash and Glenn Campbell. I don't know if my grandmother loved both of them, but that was always what we listened to going to my grandmother's place, was Johnny Cash and Glenn Campbell. So yeah, my dad is a pretty big Glenn Campbell fan. What was it like to work with him?
Well, you know what? I've come to even have a better appreciation for him and his musical gift in later years. But at the time, I just knew his hit songs, his records. By the time I get to Phoenix and Galveston and all those songs, and admired him for that. I didn't know that he was part of the Wrecking Crew, which was the ensemble out in California that played the tracks for so many artists, from the Monkees to, oh, you name it, to Frank Sinatra, everybody. And he was, one of the guitarists that would play with him. And you got to be a killer guitarist to be asked to be part of that group. So, and he was such a professional. He came in knowing exactly what to do. He knew the song. I think we did it in 2 takes. I mean, and that's something you don't hear nowadays, because we didn't have things like auto tune, where if somebody's kind of pitchy, you can fix it in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're hearing on that recording was a man who was singing in tune from the first note to the last note, with tons of personality, and we had a great time. His girlfriend at the time was Tanya Tucker,
Tanya Tucker, yeah.
and she sang. I don't know if it was the same day, but maybe it was the day afterwards at Columbia Studios in New York City, and she was great too. But there was I think a time in their lives when they were doing all sorts of things that probably things that the tabloids would pick up on, but they were very entranced with each other. I had to say, hey guys, it's time for us to work now. Glenn, you sit here. Tanya, you come into the studio. But it was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Another classic Sesame Street song that I remember from my childhood that you wrote was Alphabet Jungle. And I have a tape called the Alphabet Jungle Game. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but like
No.
it starts with that song, and then it's Elmo, Zoe, and Telly who introduce it, and it's like we're looking for letters, and every letter there's a little video cartoon for it. So yeah,
And
that's amusing. Yeah.
is it a board game or what is
No,
it?
it's a home video.
Oh, home video. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, they're
Um,
playing the game and are walking the viewer through how it all works.
gotcha.
Hmm.
Well, at that point, I was fairly known at Sesame Street. So, although it was a it was a competitive musical situation because in those days they had all sorts of people writing songs for them, including Alan Menken from who wrote Little Mermaid
Little
and all the
Mermaid. Yep.
Disney movies, and other people, even Sammy Kahn, who was a legendary songwriter from the great days of American songs.
Mhm.
So I kind of had to lobby, hey guys, don't forget me. I did this album. We won a Grammy. How about letting me sing, record a few songs, or at least write them. So that was, I think, one of my first assignments. And it's funny you mention that because I get letters from people who still kind of have an affection for that song. And one guy who keeps telling me, how do I get in touch with the girl who sang it? And I said, oh my gosh, she was like 9 years old at the time. And I've tried to find whatever uh, evidence of her signature, her mom's signature on a contract and things like that. And I still have not been able to get in touch with her. But if she's listening out there, tell her to contact me because she is very much appreciated by
Yeah,
some people.
leave a comment and I'll help you get in touch with Dennis. Yeah.
Well, I mean, thanks to social media and everything, word could reach your ears.
I was just talking to my dad about that the other day, how social media has really changed how we communicate.
Yeah, it brings us together.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. But yeah, Alphabet Jungle, yeah, that is definitely a classic. What was writing that one like? Because it's like it feels like rap kind of.
I think rap was just coming into its own, and because there's so many letters, um, I don't know. I think I just gravitated to it, or it could have been that they gave me some instructions about what they wanted musically. To be honest with you, it's a little fuzzy now, but it's like I approach it like I do almost any song. I sit down with a blank piece of paper and I come up with a title, and then I say, well, what can I do with this title? And I just jot down ideas. I just brainstorm on a piece of paper and then start scratching out things that don't work and putting in a check marks to the ones that do work. And eventually it morphs itself into something musical.
Nice. So
It's
you were earlier talking about the song Songs, which for anybody who doesn't know that one, as I said, one of my favorite Sesame Street songs, a typical song about songs, they get you humming, you start a
yeah,
strumming. And that was
yeah.
done on the show by Big Bird and Crystal Gale. But I of course remember it best from the special Elmo Palooza, where it was sung by it started with Jon Stewart, Elmo, and David Allen Greer, and then it just turned into a medley of a bunch of Sesame Street songs.
Yeah, that was uh, a lucky circumstance that they were looking. I guess they were looking for something, a musical work that would tie together little bits and pieces of all the songs that are famous on Sesame Street.
Mm-hmm.
And lyrically speaking, my song had that idea because songs are around whenever you need them, and so they could easily segue into, well, here's a Sesame Street song. Sing, of course, being one of them, and do the people in your neighborhood, all those great songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's funny that it was sung as a duet with Jon Stewart, who was not known as a singer. He wasn't then, and he isn't now. He was a comedian,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess a very flexible guy, because I guess the people who were directing the show said, "John, we have this song. We want you to sing it." And I'm suspecting that, and his voice was okay. He did a good job, and I guess it was probably fun for him to say, "Hey, I sang a duet with Elmo, so how can you turn that down?" So,
Mm-hmm.
but I still get letters on that too, because people remember Elmo Palooza. It was pretty popular, and I think the recording of it did it pretty well too.
Yep, I have the CD for it.
Yep, and I
Mhm.
have a VHS of it.
Me too.
Okay, there we go.
Yep. Another funny Sesame Street song that you wrote that I always found very catchy was "Sing Me a Silly Song" with Big Bird and Elmo and Oscar.
Wow, you are so impressing me by your knowledge of not only Sesame Street but songs that I worked on. Yeah, that was my return to Sesame Street to actually record an album. In this case, it was a little different because it was a collection of songs from Sesame Street, but I felt it needed some glue to tie it together,
Mhm.
and it was supposed to be an album of their silly songs. So I took the title and ran with it and did a song called "Singing Me a Silly Song," and got Carol Spinney, Big Bird, to sing it. I think I'm gonna say Oscar's singing it too, right?
Yep.
If memory recalls.
Mhm.
And being the like any songwriter, you want your songs to appear in as many places as possible. And since I was producing at least some of that album, I pitched my song to Sesame Street, saying, "Here's another good song. I'd love to see this on the album." It was a song called "Itch and Scratch,"
Mhm.
which I wrote with a friend here in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's a funny story about her because she has a little bit of a Sesame Street connection. Her name is Janet McMahon, so we're still friends. And so we wrote "Itch and Scratch," and we got Big Bird and Oscar to sing it, which is great because they're opposite characters. And so, like in the first album, I managed to get some of my own tunes on it, and happily so. And I thought they helped enhance the album, and got to work with Carol again, Carol and Carol, because he's doing both parts.
Yep. Mhm.
Um, oh, well, this is I mentioned my friend Janet. So funny note, because when I decided I was going to record Sesame Street Country in Nashville, I got out of the blue, I got a call from a stranger I didn't know from Nashville saying, "Hey, I'm a person who works at the recording studio where you're going to record." And she happened to be walking by the receptionist's desk, and she saw in the schedule of recording sessions Dennis Scott, Sesame Street, whatever it was, September 12th, something. And she saw my number and she called me because she's a songwriter too. She wanted to get songs on the album.
Mhm.
Of course, we were uh, already had that settled, but she said, "Hey, I'll pick you up at the airport." And so this wonderful person picked me up at the airport. We hit off and we ended up being collaborators on different songs. But it just shows you what a wonderful town Nashville is for songwriters. Everybody was, you know, not so competitive, and everybody wanted to help each other. And there was this community of people who lived or worked near Music Row, which was all things music. So I digress a little bit, but I just found it to be an interesting story how you make friends from other places.
I got friends in low places.
That's right.
Talking about the music of Sesame Street, I wonder if you have any memories of Danny Epstein. Did you get to know him at all?
I did.
Okay.
Um, Danny Danny was he was an interesting guy. He was very important at Sesame Street.
Yeah.
He worked in their house band, and he he was very involved in some of the decision making, or practically all the decision making as it pertained to music. Um, and he kind of ruled with an iron fist, and um, but he and I found a way to work together. And I I'm sorry that we've lost him several years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's really part of the Sesame Street legend.
Yeah, some guests have like stories about him. I'm blah, blah, blah. I'm actually very good friends with his daughter, Ivy Austin.
Hmm.
And so, like, when I tell people at Sesame Street that I'm close with Ivy, the first thing that I usually hear is, "Oh, that's Danny Epstein's daughter." So a lot of people have like stories about him because of that.
Well, I will say this: when we were setting out to record the album, the Sesame Street album, I think Danny said, "Hey, well, we've got our house band here, and they can do it." And I thought, well, this is a country album. I mean, it would be really great if we could do it in Nashville. And there was some resistance by some of the people at Sesame Street to do that. And I kind of pushed for it. And I'm so glad that we did because Danny came down there and he saw these first-rate musicians, just knocking it out of the park with, maybe one rehearsal of the song. And he was just blown away by all the great musicianship there. And um, I think he had a great time, and that kind of drew us together a little bit too. So we had a great experience together.
That's awesome. So moving on a little bit from Sesame Street, how did you get involved in doing Mister Rogers?
Mr. Rogers came years later. In fact, it was after Fred Rogers had already passed.
Oh, okay.
And, I do love telling the story because, of course, I knew about Mr. Rogers, but I grew up, I was a little past him to be a viewer of his show,
Okay.
but I knew what he was all about. And I had the TV on one day in the kitchen, and I was making myself a sandwich. And well, because he came on the air on one of his reruns, and he was singing this charming song called "It's You I Like." And I was just thinking, wow, this is a great little song. I wonder if anyone else has ever recorded it. And after doing a little research, I found out, in fact, nobody had. And my mind just went on this path saying, this is a song that needs to be appreciated, not only in the way that Fred Rogers did it, which was very endearing, but I wondered what would it sound like if we gave it more of a contemporary flair to it and made it a little bit more of a song that adults would listen to as well. So that set me on a journey which lasted 2 years. It took almost a year to get the folks at Mr. Rogers Productions to feel comfortable enough with me to allow me to take their songs, their babies or Fred's songs, and do something different with them. And in the process, I got to know them and we got to know each other. And it just shows you, even at that point, I had a Grammy that I won for Sesame Street, but that really wasn't enough for them to just say, okay, we'll do whatever you like. I mean, I had to earn their trust. And then once we got past that hurdle, I had to find people like I did on Sesame Street, celebrities who would do their renditions of Fred Rogers songs. And that took close to a year to compiling that because it's not easy. You have to find the people, you have to get past their managers and their agents and their lawyers and everything else. And then you have to find the songs that were good fits for them. Then you have to somehow find time that they are available to go into the studio to record these things. So it was quite an undertaking, but when it was all over, it won a Grammy for Best Children's Album. And that's not the reason I set out to do it, because it just was a project that I felt needed to be made. And when it was done, I got a call from Mrs. Rogers, who was still with us. And she said, I just listened to the album. I want you to know that I love it and Fred would have loved it. And, that was all I really needed to hear. That was really made it worthwhile. It made it special.
So you never did actually get to meet Fred Rogers?
I did not, but I got to know Joanne Rogers pretty well, and we stayed in touch. And she was a good friend to the project and to me. So she's missed. They're both missed. I mean, I run into people all the time, and they say we wish we had Fred here because we need him more now than ever. And I'm going to agree to that.
So another show that you worked on that I mentioned in the intro and that you and I were talking about a little bit getting ready for this was Noddy in in the UK. What was that like?
Well, I actually did the North American version.
Okay.
Appeared in the United States and Canada and different places. Um, that was an incredible experience because I was not only hired to write the songs, I was the music director of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So it was my responsibility to get the songs written and recorded and shipped off to Canada where they filmed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to pay homage to the gentleman who brought me onto the project. His name is Rick Sigelkow, and he worked on other children's shows like Shining Time Station. He was very involved with that. And I had been going to his office every now and then saying, hey, here I am. I write children's music and I've got awards. I would love to work with you. And he was very, very polite and very professional and said, yeah, we'll see. Maybe something will come up. And he gave me a break after having enough of me being a nudge. He said, I'm going to try you. Well, he didn't say it this way. He said, here's a smaller project I have. It was a UK production because he worked with the British Columbia people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called The Animals of Farthing Wood.
Mm-hmm.
And he just needed like 2 or 3 songs for me to play, write and record, which I did. And so I won his confidence with that. And then months later, maybe even a year later, I got the call and said, we have this project called Noddy, and it's based on a UK character that is beloved there. It's kind of like,
Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's why I thought it was done in England because it was based on
so it
a
was,
character.
yeah, Noddy was like the Mickey Mouse of England. So the idea was to get Noddy into the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up, I came on board and I wrote, I'm going to say 130 songs for 2 seasons of it.
Wow.
Not all in one night, but it was like an assembly line of
Mm-hmm.
music because the song had to reach them before they filmed it, obviously. And while we were doing that, we were writing and recording the songs for the episode that would follow. So it really was an assembly line. But I was pleased that the quality of the music maintained a high level. And it was really one of the most ambitious and rewarding creative projects I think I've ever worked on. And I'm very proud of some of the songs that came out of it and the quality of the show. It really, Rick held it to high standards, and the puppet work on it is amazing. And the writing and the actors, it was just an honor to be part of it.
That's great. And you also worked on one of my very favorite shows from when I was a kid that also is UK based, The Tweenies.
Yes.
Okay.
The Tweenies. Well, for the Tweenies, I was not called upon to be a songwriter.
Okay.
It was an interesting not an experiment. It was an assignment where we took the songs that were recorded by the British actors or singers in England, but because they wanted this song, or not, excuse me, they wanted this show to appear to the American market.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was going to be on Nickelodeon or one of those, outlets. So they had to make it more accessible to American kids or Canadian kids, northern kids. And so my assignment was to strip the songs of the singers from England and put on American actors who would sound like those characters and still still sing in sync with what they did. Mm-hmm. So it was technologically a challenge. Luckily, we had Pro Tools, which is a very sophisticated recording process, and that was available. So I found actors whose voices fit the big what would you call them? They're not puppets. They're like full-size puppets.
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know what the Tweenies is, like it was this show about these, I don't know what the hell they were, but they were these like kids of different solid colors. Like one was purple in color, one like that was the color of their skin. One was blue, one was orange, one was yellow, and they weren't, as Dennis said, they weren't puppets, but they were like these walk around characters.
Right, right. So, but they all had different personalities. So
Mm-hmm.
I tried to match the voices of the people I hired to sound like they were. And once we got past that, we just turned them out one after another. I forget, there were quite a few episodes of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it had played in the American Northwestern areas for quite a while. And then it's, who knows, it may make a comeback any day now, but it was it was a very different kind of project, but it was for the same gentleman, Rick Siegelkow, who I worked for on Noddy. So,
Okay.
We've, as a result of, going through all the work that went into Noddy, we've gone on to do a number of projects. Even as early as last year, I did something for him.
Oh, wow. Nice. And what was your involvement in Clifford the Big Red Dog?
Well, by way of full disclosure, my involvement with Clifford was not for the TV show, but there was a live show that toured the country, going to big stadiums and places, auditoriums. And I created music for this show featuring Clifford and the family. And I'm trying to remember how many songs. I'm going to say there were about six songs in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting project to do because we had to work with, of course, with Clifford's actual voice and get him to sing, and then
like the voice actor.
I think so. So.
Which was John Ritter from Three's Company.
Right. Well, this came afterwards, so yeah. So that's sad to have lost John, but anyway, so it toured like it was what they call a bus and truck company. So they would go from city to city and put on the show and singing my songs that were part of it. And so, I got to be part of the Clifford world.
That's great. So to wrap it up, are you working on anything new at the moment that you can talk about?
Well, I will say that not too recently, I finished a second Mister Rogers album.
Okay.
Which used the same approach as the first one, getting celebrity artists to sing songs written by Fred Rogers, putting their own stamp on it and taking it to another level of recording. And we got some pretty big names on it. People like Vanessa Williams and, oh my gosh, Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees.
Oh, nice.
And the Cowsills and Kelly Pickler and Lee Greenwood, just some great names. And that was an interesting story too, a very uphill climb. You would think, well, you're already connected with Mr. Rogers, and it should be no problem just doing this album. But there was a new group of people who kind of took over for Fred's production company because Joanne Rogers had passed, and to be honest, they were not on board for this. I really had to take it upon myself to say, you know what, I feel we really have to keep honoring Fred's music, because a lot of people don't know this. The songs that Fred Rogers wrote, he wrote for his TV show, and there were, I forget how many, 210 of them or more. And people don't know that he wrote the songs for his show. And, so many of them are treasures. I've gotten onto this kick of wanting to be someone who helps keep his musical legend alive, as well as all his teachings and his wisdom. So as a result of working on this album, I also have started a campaign to get Mr. Rogers inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. So I think he's just as celebrated as some of the great songwriters we have in our country. So I encourage your listeners to go to what is it, campaign.org, or just go to the Mister Rogers website, which I created, called thankyoumisterrogers.com, because that's
Link
the
in the
name of the album.
description.
Yep. The album is called Thank You, Mr. Rogers, and the website is thankyoumisterrogers.com. And they'll see on the first page, there's a place you can sign up and join the petition to get him onto or into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. That's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's something I've done pretty recently, and very proud of it, proud of the way it turned out, and hopefully we could keep Mr. Rogers' musical legacy going.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah, like this year is I think the 55th anniversary of the TV show. So what a great way to celebrate his legacy as a person and also as a TV personality.
Oh yeah, I mean, he was a one of a kind, and I can tell you from working with his music and studying his lyrics and seeing what he was all about, he was the real thing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't some man who was a hired actor to put on a children's show. He was involved with it on every level, from writing the scripts to the music and helping direct it, and also his understanding of children and what children need, and even as adults, what makes us better people and making a better world. He had it all going on. So, bless him for, what he did. And so I people don't know this, music was his first love. So it's only proper and fitting that he be recognized for that, hence the campaign to get him into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. So there you go.
Well, that's great. That's great that you're putting all that together. I think that's awesome.
Well, and thanks to you for allowing me to mention it to your listeners, because I'm sure there are a lot of Mr. Rogers fans out there, and I hope they'll check out the album and then help us with our campaign to honor him.
Well, is there anything else you want to say to wrap up? I've finished up everything I've written down.
Oh my gosh. Well, there are lots and lots of stories, but so you asked about some of the more recent things. I just recently worked on a song for a client. She's more than a client, I'm getting to know her very well. She's written a number of books called Bella, the World's First Tooth Fairy. And she wanted to have a song that kind of personified what this tooth fairy is all about. And she's a young character, and she's kind of an industrious girl. She wants to try new things, and she's also wants to stand on her own, and she's just learning how to become a tooth fairy. So I wrote a song called Winging It. Because she doesn't know what she's going to do next. She's just is kind of winging it. So I'm really happy with the way that turned out, and we're hoping that it will at some point become a children's TV show. So we'll see what happens with that.
Well, good luck with. I wish you all the best of luck with that. And Dennis, thank you very much for joining me for Nostalgia Talk today.
Well, thank you. And as one of the songs that I wrote for the Mister Rogers Project and for the Noddy Show, I will say to you, because I really appreciate your work, and so I say thank you for being you.
Well, thank you very much. And to all you listeners out there, as you guys know, this is episode number 69, which basically means, that's a filler word, which means that we are coming up to the big 7-0. However, I don't know what's going to come out of that at the moment, because as you guys probably know, I mean, if you follow Nostalgia Talk on social media, Facebook, Twitter, if that's still what we're calling it, Facebook, Twitter, links are in the description. As you guys probably know from Nostalgia Talk social media, due to the actors' strike, a couple of episodes, some that haven't even been announced yet, have been delayed. I am trying to work on getting somebody to come on episode number 70 to make this a big one, because it's the big 7-0. Hopefully something comes out of that. But you guys know where to go for all updates, Facebook, Twitter. So I'll keep you updated there. Hopefully some of the ones that haven't been announced yet will get off the ground once the strike is over. I just hope that everyone's happy with what ends up happening with the strike. I realize that for some people that's not going to happen, but you can only make do with what you've got. So in the meantime, I will see you for episode number 70 of Nostalgia Talk. Stay tuned. Peace.